Clear prop.
Star 738 Yankee number 2 following twin traffic, 3 mile final, clear Sutton. 1 Charlie Bravo, extra in runway 25, going 4 mile final.
This is Behind the Prop with United Flight Systems owner and licensed pilot Bobby Doss and his co-host, Major Airline Captain and designated pilot examiner Wally Mulhern. Now let's go Behind the Prop.
What's up, Wally?
Hey, Bobby, how are you?
I am fantastic. This week, we're going to tackle a topic that I'm sure we've all heard about or thought about, and we're just going to call the show Own It. We're going to start off with check rides, Wally. I think I did an okay job owning my commercial and my multi-engine check rides. I came prepared. I had notebooks. I brought breakfast. I did all the right things. I owned the whole day, right? Which made it go fairly well both times, obviously. You're a DPE who sees, I'm sure, a rainbow of preparation. What would you say the percentages might be for owning it versus not owning it as it relates to check rides?
I'd say 70% do and maybe 30% don't. And one thing that I just recently had a check ride with a young man. It was a commercial check ride, and he was doing a lot of things that were just flat out wrong. And this wasn't, I'm not talking about bad technique, but he was doing things that were just wrong. And I said to him, I said, where did you come up with that way of doing it? And he said, well, my CFI told me. And I said, well, okay, well, where is the reference for this? And he says, well, it would be, it'd be in the AIM or the FAR or whatever. And we went and looked it up, and I showed to him that what he was doing was wrong. I mean, he had been getting some, he got some bad information from his CFI, and as I was talking to the young man about when we come back and do this check ride over again, we were, I was explaining to him. I said, look, you are a commercial pilot now, and the standard is higher. It is higher for a commercial pilot, as it should be. And, it was his check ride. It wasn't his CFI's check ride. Yeah, maybe the CFI gave him some wrong information. And I'm not 100% convinced that the CFI did give him the wrong information. Maybe he heard it wrong. But this was, and I'm not going to get into the details of what it was, but it was something that this guy should have known better on. Definitely should have known better. He said the CFI told him that it was one thing, and he came in and flew the airplane using that information, and it was just wrong. So the point that I was trying to tell him is that, look, this is your check ride. It's when you go to the doctor and you present the doctor with a symptom, and the doctor comes up with a game plan, it's your body that you're gonna that this doctor is gonna perform this procedure or this treatment on. Yep. I would like to think that if you are not comfortable with whatever the doctor is going to do, if you go in and you got an ingrown toenail and he says, well, we need to amputate the foot, I would like to think you'd say, well, wait a minute, we really need to cut off the foot for an ingrown toenail? And, there might be a discussion there.
Time for a second opinion, maybe?
Absolutely. So, I feel like, everybody has a copy of the check ride. Everybody has the ACS. If you don't have the ACS, well, you're not doing your due diligence, because for about $10, you can buy a printed copy of it, but if you want a digital copy, it's free. You can just go to the FAA website, and for those of you who use ForeFlight, it's available on there. So it's available for free. A digital copy, and again, if you want paper, you could print it off, or just spend $10 and get a printed copy. But everybody should have a copy of the ACS, and everybody should be somewhat familiar with it. And I get the glassed over look a lot when I talk about the ACS. A lot of people will say, "Oh yeah, I've read it," and I say, "Well, then if you're telling me you've read it, you're probably not telling the truth, because I look at the ACS as more of a reference, something that you reference more so than something that you would read, because quite honestly, if you read it, it's probably good for insomnia at 2 a.m. If you can't go to sleep, maybe try reading some of this, and it might put you to sleep pretty quick. But just knowing what's on the check ride, you should never be surprised at what's going to be on a check ride. I mean, it's all right there in the ACS, and that's what we as examiners are required to use to come up with a plan of action for the check ride.
And so, I mean, we've talked about this multiple times, but it seems like even if people have listened to us taking a check ride with you, they've listened to your show, maybe this isn't falling into the right part of the ear. The ACS is again free, and I'm looking at a current private ACS, the printout version in my pilot supply shop up front, and on A12 in the back, it's even got a checklist. I mean,
Right.
We can talk about the checklist usage, but if I have a practical test checklist, it tells me everything I should be thinking about and preparing for that. We
Yeah.
have an extended version that we've created for our students, but a good example as I review this checklist. How many times have you been on a check ride and an applicant didn't have foggles? More than once?
Oh, definitely more than once. I was just trying to think. Yeah. But that happens quite a bit, and that's something I brief them. I say, look, I do not have a view limiting device. This is your responsibility. And it's funny because you get the same, you hear the same grunt when you say to them, okay, let's put the foggles on. You hear, ugh.
Yep.
And it's like, oh boy.
That's an expensive pair of foggles if you think about it. It could be a very expensive pair of foggles.
It is.
So it's definitely falls in this mindset of owning it. Like, are you prepared? Are you owning the day? Are you owning the ride? Are you owning the tasks? Do you know, I don't know that I did. And so I guess we're trying to help, but I know I was taught about winds and to line up for the winds and do all these things as I was preparing for maneuvers, etc. But I remember being told to chair fly stuff and thinking through stuff, but I don't really remember kind of dry running my whole practical exam. I remember being afraid of that day and organizing some stuff and putting it in a folder, but I don't remember really owning the day. I do remember expecting my CFI to be very much the director of the day, right?
Oh, I can tell you, I did not own mine. My 40th anniversary of my private pilot check rides coming up in May, and I remember flying over to Shreveport, Louisiana, in a Cherokee 140 for the check ride, and no, I certainly did not.
And so, as we talk about it, what are some of the things that, well, I'll share again, I think I've shared this in the past, but something that I struggled with was navigation. And I don't know why the VOR and the 360-degree radials bothered me or confused me, or if I thought I was on the 180, but I was really tracking on the 0, and that just didn't make any sense to me early on, and now I know how to do it. But do you see that students struggle with navigation and are owning navigation? Is navigation one of those things?
Yeah. It actually it seems to have gotten better. It really has.
Because of the magenta line or because of knowledge?
No, I think word is out that if you do a check ride with Wally, he's going to have you do some VOR navigation. So you better have your act together, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That is a good thing if word is out, and I would like to think I would venture to say every DPE and I know in this area is doing the same thing. So yeah, I'm gonna have you track to a VOR, maybe from a VOR, maybe have you fly a heading to intercept a radial to or from a VOR. But here lately, it's actually gotten much better. Now it may take a while. I'm sometimes may get a little bit impatient. I'm thinking, come on, just center the needle, get a 2 indication, and go for it. They maybe take a little bit longer than I would like, but that's okay. They're meeting the standard, and they are navigating to or from a VOR.
Yeah, and I don't remember what was so difficult about it, but boy, I felt confused a lot. And I remember the quote-unquote gouge that I had for my check ride, and I kind of had an idea of what step was going to come next. And I knew after that last takeoff over at Weiser Field that we were probably going to go to the Humble VOR and then divert to the Navasota VOR. And boy, I just wanted to nail it and get that part over with. So we're talking private students at this point. If you're an instrument student, hopefully you can track a VOR and navigate VO1. But what else is something that you see people not owning on check ride day, Wally?
I think weather is something that we see that as well. One thing I love to ask an applicant, if I'm ever in a flight school that has a window in the room that we're in, I love to say to the applicant, how's the weather today? And just see how they approach finding out what the weather is, because there's 2 approaches to doing it. One approach is to look out the window. The other approach is to pull out your phone or your electronic device and pull up the weather. I kind of like starting with looking out the window.
For sure.
How is the weather today? And I'll do that drill with a lot of people with, if we are in a room that we don't have any outside windows, I'll say, just for the heck of it, let's walk outside. And we'll walk outside, and I'll say, okay, what do you think the temperature is? And they'll give me a number. I'll say, okay, well, what do you think the clouds are? Are they we're not talking about height, but are they scattered, broken, overcast, clear, what? And 98% of the time they get that right. Now I'll admit, getting the height of the clouds, sometimes I am way off because the visibility is bad. They look lower.
Yep.
So, but anyway, I'll say, well, what do you think the height of the clouds are? And we're usually in the ballpark. I'll say, what are the winds? Well, I think the winds are coming from this direction. Of course, if you can see a windsock, that's really helpful. Well, and then we'll go in and we'll actually pull up the weather, and lo and behold, most of the time, they're pretty darn close.
Yep.
Pretty darn close.
I kind of think it's weather theory, too. I mean, that was not the most exciting subject as it relates to aviation.
Yeah.
But, boy, it is important, kind of just knowing front lines. And I'm constantly on people around here to be thinking that weather is not constant. And too often, I worry about winds all the time. I'm sure I've mentioned it 1,000 times. Winds are ever-changing. And for a student pilot, talking about winds that are 170 at this airport, 170 versus 210, it's a big delta if I'm a student pilot and it's 10 or 12 knots of wind.
Yeah.
It's a significant crosswind for a student pilot on a solo. So we got to be thinking that if we have a front coming through and it's going to bend that direction of flight or direction of wind by 40 or 50 degrees, that's going to be a big change for students.
Right.
And we need to be helping them think through that and make sure they're thinking about that as well.
Right.
The one that I think that I was most scared of out of all this owning on my check ride had to be stalls. I remember a phase in my private training where the first time I ever went out by myself to practice and did a power on stall, I think I was extremely proud of myself. Like I overcome some fear that was a fear that shouldn't have been a fear, but was something that was in me, right? And I finally did one on my own to a full buffet, and I thought, man, I can do this now, right? I remember this feeling. The day the DPE was in there, I felt just as scared. But if you learn how to do it and do it right, it's pretty benign.
Yeah.
But I got to think this is what students still struggle with.
Yeah. And a lot of it is just keeping the airplane coordinated in the stall. Most of the airplanes that I'm in are 172s or single engine Pipers, whether it be a 140, 160, 180. These airplanes are pretty gentle stalling airplanes if you remain coordinated. You can go out and do a full power off or power on stall in a 172, and as long as you're keeping that ball centered and keeping the airplane coordinated, it's very, very boring for me as the examiner, and that's a good thing when I say very boring. The airplane just the nose falls just very gently. Where it sometimes gets a little more exciting is when they don't keep it coordinated and that airplane falls off to one side over the other. So, it's just keeping the airplane coordinated. And I know when I got out of little airplanes, that's something that's not really something that we look at too much in big jets. And I know when I was getting my seaplane rating up in Alaska several summers ago, probably about 6 or 7 years ago, the guy that was giving me my training just loved to tell me, he just always referred to me as Captain. He says, "Captain, your ball's not in the center." And he just loved telling me that, and he got to tell me that a lot, man, because I was flying around sideways in that airplane a lot.
Well, and I think for me, the component of the stall was obviously being afraid of all that power looking straight up or none of that power pulling straight back, thinking what's going to happen. And I do think if you're out there and you're a private student or just finished your private rating, what you're going to continue to learn if you keep training is that these people that made these aircraft were very smart. And unfortunately, a lot of people have probably been hurt along the way to improve upon them or even make them more better. And as I've continued to learn more about stability and how these aircraft were designed and how some wings have different effects on them to even keep us more stable in flight, you pretty much learn that these things aren't going to get upside down on their own. We almost have to turn them upside down if they're going to get in really uncoordinated upside down flight. These stalls, even uncoordinated, are probably going to get the plane right back to straight and level pretty quick because of the way they were designed. And I think the more I learned about those sorts of aspects of the airframe and how the designers and physics all work around them, I started getting less anxious, and I could then own it better in my later pilot career. So if you're out there and you're afraid or nervous about stalls and don't want to own them in your check ride, trust me, we've done millions of them before you, and you're going to be fine if you do them the right way, and they're not intended to be scary for sure.
Right.
What about airspace? Is that something that you see people? I mean, private pilots that are VFR, they don't know any different, really. Is airspace one they own?
I would say, what I find is that the people who are learning to fly at more complex airports are better with their airspace than people who are not.
You mean the ones that fly in no airspace?
Well, in just uncontrolled.
Sure.
I'd say the ones that I have out of this airport do a pretty good job. There may be. Usually what'll happen is I'll ask them at, the first airspace that I'll tend to talk about is Bravo airspace because we're under the Bravo. And, I'll say, okay, as a private pilot, can you go into Bravo airspace? And, they'll say yes, and we need clearance and all that. And I'll ask them about their cloud separation requirements, and they'll say, well, 1,000 above, 500 below, and 2,000 horizontally. And I'll say, well, okay. And then we'll move on to Delta airspace, and they'll tell me the same cloud clearance requirements, and more times than not, they'll say, well, wait a minute, no, Bravo airspace, that was clear of clouds, and so they'll come back and they'll fix that answer. That's usually what happens. But it can be airspace can be confusing. There's no two ways about it. It's when I became an examiner, it's actually something I had to do a lot of studying on and getting back into small airplanes because the whole airspace system changed many years ago. When I came up, we didn't have A, B, and C and D airspace. It was Group 1, Group 2 TCAs, terminal control areas, and it was just and as when you're flying IFR all the time, although you should know it, you really can fly efficiently without understanding all that stuff because you're in controlled airspace all the time.
Yeah, that happened to me when I got my instrument rating. I kind of forgot for a while and then decided to pursue that commercial and certificate, and boy, I realized I forgot a lot of information really quick. The big scary one, when people ask me about learning how to fly, they say, what's it like? How do you get your private certificate? And I said, well, you go through a bunch of training and then you take a check ride, and the check ride's kind of like your driver's test, and there's things similar to parallel parking. I would say that the emergency landing is similar to driving and parallel parking as emergency landing is to the check ride. It's that one thing we all kind of practice and fear the most, and if we've done our due diligence in our work, it's not that big of a deal to nail it. Is that something you see people not owning, or give us your perspective there?
When you do the emergency landing on a check ride, it's of course, the higher you are, the more time you have. So the less critical making expedited decisions are if you're at a high altitude. There are times when, for weather reason and for whatever, I mean, we ended up getting out up to maybe 6,000-7,000 feet to get above some clouds to do the air work. And in that case, what I will usually have the applicant do is an emergency descent down to a 2,000 to 3,000 foot altitude, and then do the emergency landing. But I see people just taking a long time to make a decision of where they want to go, and the sooner you can kind of make a decision. Most people use the ABC method of airspeed, best place to land, and then checklist. Well, as soon as you establish that airspeed, and I like to say trim for the airspeed rather than pitch for the airspeed, because if you just pitch for it and then you divert your attention to a checklist or something, you may relax that control pressure and you're not at that airspeed anymore. So I like to say trim for the airspeed, then find your best place to land, and then get into that checklist. And because the checklist is going to try to restart the engine. I mean, that's the ultimate goal is, man, the engine quit. Well, let's restart it. We don't have to land in a field anymore if we can restart it. So the sooner we can get to that the C part of the ABC, the better. But a lot of times, if maybe let's say we're 3,000 feet AGL when we simulate the engine failure, well, by the time they get to that, they're down at maybe 1,500 feet. They've wasted 2 or 3 minutes trying to find a place to land. Now, sometimes circumstances dictate that, but a lot of times the best place to land is right underneath you too.
Yep.
So
I remember playing these games and my instructor, teaching me sometimes the hard way that the best place was right behind me, right? And I think we talked a lot about where's the best place to land. And if we got quiet at all when I was early in my training, it would just almost immediately come out of his mouth, where's the best place to land? Right now, where's the best place to land? We'd be talking about VOR navigation. We'd stop that conversation. Where's the best place to land? Mm-hmm. And if you're a young pilot, you really should be thinking about it that often, because it's like anything else. Now, if I fly to Austin, I'm just kind of constantly always gazing for the best place to land and where would I go, and I'm going to avoid those trees for this field, and that lake is no good compared to that field, and oh, there's a big road under construction that's probably not got power lines yet. I'm going to use that place. And it's just subconscious almost as a pilot once you've gotten a few hundred hours under your belt that you're thinking at any moment this engine could quit turning. Something could seize up.
My father was very old school, and he used to always tell me that just talking about going places for an appointment or something, he would say, you need to leave early enough. So not if you have a flat tire, but when you have a flat tire, you can change the tire and still get there on time. This is back in the day where flat tires were a little bit more common. We all have pretty good tires on our cars now, and it's been a long time since I've changed a tire. But and that's what I say with students. You need to be ready for not if the engine fails, but when the engine fails. I have had engine failures, and sometimes in twin engine airplanes, and one time in a single engine airplane, and had to do a real time emergency landing, and walked away with it just fine. So the training, it's there for a reason.
Yeah, for sure. The last thing that I'll mention as check rides, and we'll talk about a few other things we need to own it as pilots, was the simulation of short field and soft field takeoffs and landings, flying out of here all the time. Even the small runways, 50 feet wide and 4,000 feet long, it's hard to simulate a 1,000-foot runway and a 50-foot obstacle. Obviously, you do it and you practice it over and over again, but there's a lot of slack. No matter how much you simulate, we're going to land on that third dash. It's hard to simulate that in real life. I don't know if I could personally navigate and land in a box, 1,000 feet. That'd be tough. How do these young pilots that your applicants doing for you on these different types of landings?
They're actually doing a pretty good job. The one thing we have to know is that, and it's right in the ACS, a go-around is an option. If you come in and you do not like the way things are looking, if you're going to land short on your short field landing, well, that's out of tolerances, so it's going to be a failed check ride. It's going to be an unsat.
I don't want to put you on the spot, so I won't, but I'll say, do you think a DPE would ever flunk someone because they chose to go around?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. That's just good judgment.
That's great judgment.
That's great judgment. Yeah. Yeah. Now,
18 of them?
At some point, we got to land. At some point, we do have to land.
We're out of fuel, Wally. We're going around.
Yeah.
That might be a problem.
Yeah. But no, and it just says it in the ACS. If you're not in a position to I forgot how it's worded, but it says execute a go around in a timely manner, I think is what it is, how it's worded.
Yeah, so. That's judgment call too. So a timely manner could be 500 feet above the ground, and also it could be 100 feet above the ground.
Yeah.
So what are some other things, if we talk about the topic of owning it, and we're mostly talking about check rides and owning those check rides today, what other things do you think we don't own? And I'll start off with one of my favorites. As I fly with people, they almost try to please people, and they don't want to say the words unable or the word unable. If you're unable, you should say you're unable.
Right.
And honestly, if you just don't have a good feeling about what it is, it's okay to say unable.
Right.
There's no reason to depart a part of the airport that you don't want to depart yet. Meaning, you could be on my tarmac and they tell you to start taxiing, and you can say unable, I need to wait, I'll tell you when I'm ready again. I don't think you're gonna make anybody mad.
Yeah.
And if they tell you, hey, we got a jet on shore final, no delay, you're clear to take off, unable. Well, all that means is you're gonna wait, and
right.
That's it.
Right.
And make some good decisions. That's
right.
probably always going to be a good decision.
Yeah, and I would just say if you do accept a clearance from air traffic control, like expedite your takeoff, and this happened to us today on a check ride. The young man accepted it, and he went out there and goofed off and made an airplane go around. And he was oblivious to it. He didn't realize what happened. I said, do you realize what you just caused? You caused a go around. And yeah, that other airplane, they should be able to fly a go around. Is it a big deal? No, it's not really a big deal. But had my applicant, done what he really should have done, the other airplane wouldn't have had to go around.
I think just being around a flight school all day, every day, and hearing students talk, students of all ages and calibers of aviation time, I think one thing that I wish more people would own is the go, no-go decision. There's a lot of conversation from student to CFI, and I hear CFIs trying to teach them how to make those decisions, checking the weather, checking ATIS, what are your personal minimums, on and on and on. But I just continuously hear too many students not able yet to make the go, no-go decision. And sometimes it's an instrument student, sometimes it's a commercial student.
Yeah.
We all want to go, and I think it's easier to say, Wally, what do you think?
Right.
Than it is to say, here's my reasoning. I would say no-go, and then let an instructor tell you where you might have made a mistake in that no-go decision. It's never wrong to say I'm not going to go, but did you think of this? Did you think of this? Did you think of this? Because we've had it on episodes in the past. There's a lot of criteria that's going to change your mind on those personal minimums. I'm going to ask my girlfriend to marry me in 1 hour. You're probably going to be a go in that exact same scenario.
Right.
How do you learn to make those things strong, firm, go, no-go decisions to protect you?
Right. And a lot of it is just very... It's simple math. I mean, I might be doing a private pilot check ride, and it's 1,000 overcast, and I'll just look at the applicant and I'll say, well, what do you think? And it's your call. Are we going to go fly or not? And of course, I mean, there's no way we're going to be able to do a check ride on 1,000 overcast. But, sometimes, I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer right there. The ones that are kind of tough is when it's, we have a north-south runway here, 1735. The winds may be 240 at, 12 knots. Boy, that's not as black and white.
Yep. Or I've heard and seen 2,700 foot, maybe scattered or broken. That's scattered in one ATIS and broken the next ATIS and scattered the next ATIS, and the wind's somewhat calm probably on a day like that because it's sticking around. But it's a tough decision. I mean, gosh, I don't know what I would have done when I was a student pilot.
Yeah.
I would have wanted to, if I was feeling good, I would have wanted to go, but boy, that could have made for a hard day for sure.
I actually had a check ride where a young man, I believe it was a private check ride, he flew into a cloud, and we pushed the nose over and got out of the cloud, and I was shocked. And as we were debriefing and we were talking about when we were going to come back and redo this check ride, I said, what were you thinking? And he said, well, the ATIS said it was 4,000 scattered, and we're only at 2,500 feet.
Can you see the big
I
white
said,
thing?
well, according to that, there should not have been a cloud there, but there was,
That's the classic not owning it, by the way.
Yeah, exactly right. It's like, coming up to an intersection, you got a green light, not even glancing over to the side. Yeah, I got a green light. Well, they're going to stop. Well, you hope they are.
Yeah, I think I'm just spitballing here some, but the runway, obviously we have the right to own the runway when we've been cleared for that runway. I often worry that people are trying to please other people. At this airport, we kind of have a dead center exit called Echo. It's right in the middle of the runway. And a lot of times, if you land the least bit long as a student pilot, that's pretty hard to slow down and get. There's golf and hotel, and they're a little further away, but I think people lock up the brakes a lot to make echo because that's the cool place. That's where the cool kids go, right?
Right.
I don't think there's any reason not just to go down to golf and taxi for another 7 or 8 seconds. It's not going to be the end of the world.
Yeah.
If they ask you to exit echo, what's the right thing to say? Unable, taxi on down.
Right.
Yeah, you might make a plane go around. They got another 6 minutes of their life. They can probably make it go around as well.
Yeah.
I guess lastly, I'll end with one if you want to think of one. I think you have the 1,000% right as a student of any caliber at any flight school to own you and your CFI's relationship. There's lots of facets to that, but look, if things aren't working, have a big boy or big girl conversation, talk through it, find a new CFI, get the help you need. I've heard so many horror stories and try to preach on a regular basis to our team to take care of customers, but man, if you're not having a fun day when you go to flight training, that's something you can own. Raise your hand, talk to the flight school owner, talk to the dispatcher, talk to your DPE, ask for help. If you sense something, you're probably right, and you're probably going to make the best decision of your aviation career to make some sort of a change. You definitely can own that. You do not have to fly with the person that you're assigned to originally, for sure.
Yeah, and I would say, and this is very similar to that, own your training. Own your training. In other words, it's very likely that when you finish a lesson, you're going to have some short debrief. I mean, it may be as short as 5 minutes. It may go longer than that. But the instructor is probably going to say something to you to the effect of, next time we'll do this. And so the next time that you fly is the next time you fly. The problem is the instructor may fly 15 times between now and your next time. So, we'd like to think that maybe they would write things down, but in reality, they probably will not.
And even if they do write things down and they are using a syllabus, hopefully this flight school, they still fly with 20 or 30 people.
Right.
You might take a week off, go on vacation, enjoy the holidays. They fly with 20 other guys that have brown hair. Like, they're not going to remember who did the stalls really well and who didn't. Or did we do steep turns? I can imagine how difficult that must be to be a flight instructor, go back to back to back to back and say, you remember how fun we had last time? No, I don't really remember. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You couldn't possibly remember my check ride that you administered to me. I remember every aspect of it. I remember every turn. I remember everything that was going on. How could you? You've administered another 499 plus of those.
Right.
But to me, I had one. So
own
it.
So the point is, I mean, when you come in and the instructor says, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to do this and this and this, it's incumbent on you to say, hey, I really was struggling with my steep turns. You said we were going to do some more of those. And I guarantee the instructor is going to say, oh, yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
It is a team effort, no question.
Absolutely.
So no matter what it is that you're working on in your training or in your aviation career, own it. If you're not sure how to own it, reach out to a friend, reach out to one of us here at Behind the Prop. We'd love to help. We're all here to make your aviation career and aviation journey better. As always, fly safe and stay behind the prop.
Thanks for checking out the Behind the Prop podcast. Be sure to click subscribe and check us out online at BehindTheProp.com. Behind the Prop is recorded in Houston, Texas. Creator and host is Bobby Doss. Co-host is Wally Mulhern. The show is for entertainment purposes only and is not meant to replace actual flight instruction. Thanks for listening, and remember, fly safe.